with actors like the United States. I mean, that sort of worked out to the degree to which the United States had like a really weak currency because of their own issues. But because the United States has a much more flexible monetary policy, because they have the capacity to actually like sort of congruent the monetary policy that they have with the fiscal policy that they have. They can actually influence their economy by monetary policy. They're actually able to make their currency stronger. We're losing the advantage. We've seen a lot of markets still, like compared to the dollar, still use the dollar as the main trading currency. And that's actually increasing in presence. So the euro is losing out now. Like lastly, we also see like what's happening in Greece evidently sort of shows that it's not even the problem that it's not succeeding, the euro is not succeeding to gain garner advantages in front of the whole union, but it's actually going back in terms of achieving some apparent advantages that existed before, unity, strength, and so on and so forth. Sure, go ahead.
The dollar is flexible. That means that the U.S. monetary policy is inflating its economy, creating bubbles, creating crises.
This is like okay, so I can explain it. Like it's that you like the fact that Europe is promoting austerity, right? You like the fact that you're not using spending like public spending policies. I mean that's exceptionally bad, right? I mean the ECB is failing ultimately because it cannot and it will not create sensible monetary policy for the whole union. Why can't it? Well, simply because you have a currency that is not in any way synced with the economy, that does not have a coherent set of economies to work with, right? We have very different countries with very different economies, with very different purchasing powers, with very different sort of necessities in terms of monetary and fiscal policy. Obviously, this common currency is like gains value from all, right? So what this means is that the countries that are poor, the countries that have more need for public investment, that have more need for specific certain fiscal policies, can apply these policies without the permission of the European Union. What's this creates like two really pernicious effects. The first one is, well, these countries are simply not really well off economically. We see this in the case of Greece, we see this in the case of Portugal, we see this in the case of Spain. We see this as the main reason why countries such as Romania and Bulgaria are not adopting the euro because they can't, because their fiscal policy that they need to adopt are not admissible while having the euro. We think second, so this is simply problematic in itself. The secondary problem is the fact that this creates an entrenched power structure in which we know that there are countries that control the European Union, and this enhances the power that countries like Germany and France have, right? It creates a more clear hierarchy because it's obvious that the euro gains its power ultimately, it diminishes life, it diminishes the quality of life for people. It also diminishes the fundamental objectives of the union.
The difference in the economy of this mobile-area village in Sofia is greater than the average difference between Germany and Bulgaria. And still, Bulgaria in itself uses the same currency level. Why can that be? I believe that this debate is not a question of democracy, of values. It is a scientific question, whether having a common currency, one currency, is just more efficient. We today believe that is so. We believe that the world before 1900, when everyone was pegged to gold, and thus all currencies were together, but having the peg between each other, that means that they had a fixed exchange rate. It means that de facto it was like having the same currency, because the exchange rate never fluctuated. You always knew how much was the exchange rate between the euro and the dollar. It was never fluctuating. Was a better world. I'm going to explain. First of all, let's look at what Sherman told us. Sherman told us that, first of all, we don't have democratic mechanism of influence in the ECB. We believe that we don't have democratic mechanism of influence in the actual, any central bank, because they're not democratically elected in any way. And we believe that ECB is a very conservative central bank. We believe that's great. I'm going to show you why. Second of all, it's saying that Europe is decreasing in popularity and power in the world as a whole. We believe that that is only because other big currencies are using inflationary methods to stimulate their popularity in the short run. But do you know what happens when the short run runs out? 2008 happens. Housing prices happen. The only reason why now the US doesn't have an inflation rate of over 5% is because it is used so much in the rest of the world because of its history. And there are so many dollars out there that, percentually speaking, it is actually hard to increase the total amount of dollars. But now let's look at actually why is it a very good thing to have economics. And let's start with the easy. It's just so much easier to do business. It's easier when you know what's the actual price every day. What's the actual price every day in any country. You know that it does not fluctuate. You do not have to lose a lot of money on the exchange rate. If a big factory in Germany were to sell, let's say, 100 trucks to France, because they do not have to exchange money and thus to pay a certain fee to the ones that are exchanging the money, it means that those factories are a lot more efficient. It means that there are a lot more workers in the German factories because the German factory can pay them because they have money. The whole economy is a lot more efficient. Actual studies say that the Eurozone, since it is a Eurozone, is more than 20% more efficient just because of this. I didn't come up with these studies, the economists. Now, we believe that the second reason why this is so much better to have a sole currency is because you cannot do what Sherman glorifies, and that is have a flexible monetary policy that caters to your need. That doesn't actually exist. It only caters to your short-term artificial bursts of growth. Today, governments all over the world are spending a lot more money than they have. They're indebting themselves. And why is that? To satisfy the short-term gains in popularity because of optimism. What does that bring? When you're spending money that you do not have at
is that the type of economy that Germany has is served specifically by the ECB's policies. Why does it serve the whole of the European Union, especially those countries that don't need those things?
It serves the entire world when people are not printing money like crazy. Do you know what Greece was doing before it was in the Eurozone? Do you know why Greece had a brilliant economy before it was in the Eurozone? It did not. It had the illusion of a brilliant economy because they were printing money each and every day. Now the ECB is not printing money. Yes, that does not serve the crazy fiscal policy of spending on pensions more, more than the average income of a person. This is what they're doing in Greece. That's crazy. And yet they don't have the monetary policy to sustain that in the short run. You can see very easily and in a short run the dangers of doing that. Why does it serve Germany more? Because Germany is more clear-headed. It does not have a crazy fiscal policy of going on spending sprees that not help anyone. But then, isn't it undemocratic? No, it's not. Because in the long run, it does actually help Greece as well. Because it shows to the Greek people that spending money like crazy does not help. And yes, socialist parties like Syriza are now popular. But in 2 years, when people actually find out that they're only lying to them, that they cannot actually provide the economic gains that they say they will, when the Greek people will actually understand that the only way in which you can have real growth is not by having money right now, but first of all, working for it. That is the moment in which they're going to start having clear-headed fiscal policy that will actually help them grow in the long run. Now the US seems like it grows better than the Eurozone. We believe it is not. It is just an illusion. The Eurozone may seem slow. It is not slow. It is steady. It is not a situation. It is not a place in which you can have crazy spending on the fiscal level. The ECB has to cater for so many countries that it just cannot do this. This is why it's so conservative. They say that it's undemocratic. We say that it's brilliant. The question of whether we should have one currency or multiple currencies, it is not a question of democracy. It is not even a question of how closely our economies are. It is just a lot better if we have a single currency because we can then not have a flexible monetary policy that will just allow politicians to spend more and more because of populist reasons and actually destroy our economies more and more with each passing year.
The problem with reasoning that I don't have to account to anyone, therefore that gives me the flexibility to take care of everyone as I please and consider, has the problem of being authoritarian dictatorship. Essentially, that's its problem. We're saying essentially that the fact that the ECB considers itself apt enough to handle things without accountability does not make it a good thing. It makes it all. They say it's a scientific question. It's not about democracy. Things don't need to be democratic, just good. And that's what each and every dictator ever says. It's scientifically good for me to be your dictator, and science says I should rule you correctly. No, and also no, because we need to have accountability in order for you to decide my currency. What I work each and every day as a citizen of my country gets paid. My work is converted into coin. That coin is the labor that I have put in. For you to tell me that an unaccountable body will decide the value of my labor for me and that it's scientifically smart and I don't need to have accountability over it is Jack and you won't accept situation you get. You get a common hostage situation in which you have the prisoner's dilemma exacerbated to the fates of countries connected, in which spenders are rewarded with the fact that we depend on them. Greece can't go down, and we will give Greece deals it does not deserve because we're afraid of the euro dropping all of our euro perceived as our European Union. Now they tell us this whole idea that it's convenient that we have increases. No, that comes from the fact that we don't have tariffs and taxes and that we have free trade. We have instant mechanisms for conversion in intercurrency exchanges that has a minimal marginal impact in comparison to all of the problems structurally that we're talking about. Now, looking at this idea that crazy people bring money, real people are austere, as the scientists in the ECB say, no, that is wrong. Economists have systematically told governments that controlled inflationary spending is necessary within the cycles of economy to get past certain situations. It needs to be compensated. That austerity itself in a direct manner, because that's how many euros we have, deal with it, does not work in the context in which you should have synchronization with the cycles of the economy. Boom, bust, all that stuff. Good. So, what I'm going to be looking forward, see that there's no science backing anything up, there's no legitimacy to begin with. I'm going to be looking at why is it regrettable that the euro is there, like fundamentally. What would the world without the euro been like by comparison? And I'm going to look at a few things. First of all, we love talking about the financial crisis, right? Except the specific thing is that the financial crisis, comparatively in terms of percentage of impact, in terms of amount of impact, hit the euro countries a lot harder than countries with their own currencies. That is because they are fundamentally connected tighter amongst themselves and tighter to the international banking system that got all of the ripple of the economy. Countries that had their own coin, even if they were like poor countries like Romania, were hit less percentually because they were independent of all of that and had a lot to gain as in lose less because they had that actual independence of currency. We're not so deep in the web of the euro and its interdependence. Further on, looking at the Greek situation, like the Greek situation would not have taken place because if the Greeks would have had nobody to lie to about drop inflation except for themselves. If the Greeks would have gone on the crazy spending spree that they went on, it would have been their own drop that they would have been devaluing and then becoming poor off of the money they spent. And that would have made no sense even to the voters that wanted the comfortable life. So essentially, we're seeing that none of this would have happened. Furthermore, the whole, what we've been telling you over and over, that the euro is the tool to keep Europe at 2 speeds or 3 speeds or 4 speeds, definitely not the same speed, whatever layering you want to opt for. It's the tool that keeps countries in the fast lane and that selects the lanes for these countries, and that is inadmissible. You can't say we create this currency to have it together and we only give it to those that specifically want to do this. It's even an excuse that they use to say, no, we're assisting enough in the fact that we're valuing euro and holding up the euro, and that is inadmissible. Go.
All regions of China have the same currency. They move at the same speed, though they're so different.
I saw that China up next. Because you see, the thing with China is it has full control over their currency, and there's no actual bubbles causing trouble. Sure, they have the whole, treat their population like a workforce thing, but that's not the only thing pushing them towards economic domination. What's pushing them towards domination is absolute tight control over their currency that allows them to position themselves in a situation that they now have actual strong impact on the euro itself through how much they control currency markets, and that they can choose to drop or increase the euro better than the ECB can. The ECB cannot control the valuing and devaluing of the euro as well as the Chinese can because they control their own currency. Through that control of their currency, take over international markets, and we lose control out of all that. Now, nobody's saying we should move to individual currencies that all have housing bubbles. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we should have a body that definitely is legitimate. We should have a euro that is kept at different speeds through the mechanism of the euro that is used to keep out those that are actually just, semi-honorary members in an economic sense of the European Union, that real interactions should happen between these countries, that there should be competing currencies that adapt to the flow of that country. As even without taxation on borders, we don't have the same actual economic cycle because budgets are separated, state budgets are separated. Therefore, we have different needs at different times. We're importing. One of us will be in a flow of importing, another in a flow of exporting. It will have different currency needs, but the euro is stuck, and it's used as an excuse to say, this is the money we have, you need to be austere right now. You need to have your people suffer right now, because this is when the euro
and I think that's really a great job of explaining that. I don't need to go over that again, right? But they also talk about, yeah.
The debate is not whether one monetary policy is necessary or better than the other. The debate is about whether a Europe without a currency that can be controlled by national governments or national banks, neither can be controlled by the European Union, is better than just having like controlled national currencies. That's the only debate.
Yeah, right. National currency, like the whole point about how you can control national currency. I already explained why that's accountable to politicians
No, that is inherently not true. We believe that you do not have the elementary, that France was taking responsible policies before being part of the Eurozone. And we believe that Germany was taking responsible policies before being part of the Eurozone. And we believe that that is the point. Responsible policies can be taken only by governments of the country, because only the governments of the country know the context in which we're talking of the respective economy. Now, tackling my own argument about why it is illegitimate and self-destructive. Well, it is illegitimate because we believe that the euro brought the existence of the European Central Bank. And why is it illegitimate to have a central bank of the euro take policies for states and not the governments of their respective states? Because governments have the inherent right to keep policies as they think is going to be better for their people. Because they are the ones who have been elected by their people to give economical policies, social policies, in order for them to be, for their situation to be better. And only they know their people better. Now, we find it problematic that we have had an European Central Bank which artificially set interest rates for banks, which have actually led to a low possibility and a low willingness of people to take money or to put money in banks. Having a European Central Bank which brings artificial interest rates on the economy is intrinsically detrimental because it does not let people put money into that or get loans. Moreover, economical policies are set by other organizations. And we believe that, as we have told you, governments should be able to take whatever policy they think is going to be better for them. For instance, austerity was something which was imposed by these governments. No state had the possibility to choose if it wants to apply austerity, if it wants to apply quantitative, or if it wants to apply anything else. It was imposed by the government, which we find to be illegitimate. Governments should be able to have ownership over their economies because they were the ones elected to lead the country. Moreover, we believe that there are very different economies around Europe, and we believe that the European Central Bank does not know the different contexts of these economies. Only the governments of the country know, and they should be able to do that. No, thank you. But what we find more problematic in this is that all countries in the European Union at some point have to become part of the Eurozone. And what this means is that you're going to have at some point the Great Britain, which is going to be coerced in living its more stronger currency, the sterling, the pound, in the favor of the euro, even if the euro is weaker than the currency that they have right now. At no point do we think that coercing governments in decisions which are detrimental to them is a legitimate thing, is a good thing. Moreover, what we believe is that it is self-destructive for other purposes as well. Mainly because in the moment in which we're talking about a currency, in order for it to be covered, practically the GDP of all of the Euro countries has to be equal with the amount of euros which are on the market. Which means that if Greece, for instance, is going to have a lower GDP, that is going to affect overall the euro currency, which means that other governments and other states are going to be affected as well, and other economies. We find it detrimental to have economies being affected because of policies which were not taken by them. We find it detrimental that states such as France, such as other countries which have the Eurozone, had to suffer because of the crisis which existed in Greece. The problem with the euro currency was not a thing which came because of the decision that the French government, for instance, took, but for the decision which the European Central Bank and the government took, which we find to be detrimental. These governments are responsible in front of the population for the actions and the policies which they take. And if we want for them to be responsible, what we have to do is give them ownership over their economy. Moreover, what we find problematic is that we make people not trust the EU in this sentence. Why is this? Why is this? Because in the moment in which you have a European Central Bank, which has coerced states such as Greece, such as Portugal, such as a lot of other states to apply austerity measures that they take, it was not the idea that probably the EU is very good for decisions which were not taken by them, by either other countries and other European central banks, and for an economy which is tied together with economies which, if they are to fall, are all going to fall with the effect of a domino. So for all of these reasons, please vote a motion.
Thank you very much. Now I invite the member of the opposition. Here.
So, first of all, they tell us European Central Bank is totally illegitimate. No one opted into this. This is totally undemocratic and stuff like this. So, or stuff like UK needs to 1 point give up on their bond or something like that. So, in status quo, no one forced actually Greece or every other state opted into the Eurozone to go there. People elected the politicians and then they made the decision and then they opted into the Euro with all the things stated down, how it works and stuff like that. So everybody knew what they were signing actually. Now, the second thing is no one forced the UK to leave their currency or is going to kick them out for not being government. So that is also a false premise. Now, also we all the time see this in the media and hear this debate also how this is especially the Euro problem. If not for the Euro, neither the Greece or any of these other countries wouldn't have problems like this. This is actually not true. I think that there is a problem of Greece, Portugal, and other states like this is more problematic. And there is actually a lot of benefits that refer to these states and actually to the big states of the EU also. It was largely beneficial to both kinds of states in the EU. Now, probably those countries are likely that they're agro countries. There are not natural resources there. They have no history of being like rich, so they have no industry which they inherited from years, right? They have no large profitable industries outside of the tourist, which is seasonal and stuff like that. Also, and most importantly, they're not poor enough or they don't have too good of the laws to be the sweatshop outsource state, which is the growth path for the poor countries and stuff like that, and not rich enough for the historic reasons to be. So they're actually in the middle. Now they say to us, no, but see, there were not euro, they would denominate the currency and stuff like that, and all the initiatives and all the investments would flow into this country and stuff like that. That is all actually not true also. For example, if you have all of those laws in places for the workers, for ecology and stuff like that, which we think is detrimental for the country to be, for the populace of the country to be happy and satisfied and stuff like that, you cannot still compete with, for example, Bangladesh or other countries. So you have the countries like Serbia or Albania, which are also in Europe, who have control over their currency for not a part of this, and they still have the high employment rates, and they still they have falling economy. Now, before that, yes.
Sir, explain to us why in the context in which all countries of the European Union have to become at some point part of the Eurozone, this is not because the government is being part of the Union, they do not want to be part of it.
Okay, so if I am understanding you correctly, you're still coming to, we need to go, we should be a part of the European Union, we need to go to the monetary union, right? That is just not correct. So the thing is, what we see here, that those countries wouldn't be competitive at all without the Eurozone, without the common market. The problem is we have a global connected market which is more and more competitive with each day. Now the thing is, it is completely ludicrous to think that without the Eurozone and without the common market, which I'll later explain what is the difference of the benefits with the Euro and the common market, to think that they can compete against, for example, China, US, other large economies, because as said, they have no industry that is going to be competitive in the status quo. Also, they tell us that you see how miserable people, what would happen to those people because of the Euro, the austerity we have now and stuff like that. The Euro was beneficial until the crisis to both the big countries and the small countries. We think it is important to acknowledge this. So Germany or Denmark maybe have benefited more than other countries, but we think that the growth of the Greece before the crisis started, which is the political crisis which happened in like 2010, right? Before that, the Greece was growing at much larger pace than what would be available at all if they were not part of the without the common currency, without the common ideology, values and stuff like that, they're not really committed to help each other or to invest into each other in the ways which are not extremely profitable and beneficial to other side, which is not true for European Union. As we can see from the infrastructure projects that were financed by the richer states of the European Union, as we can see by other policies that were not financially beneficial, like cutting tuition costs for other European member states to go to other countries to study there and stuff like that. So yeah, before that,
Slovakia, Slovenia, these are countries that had a huge drop in purchasing power, while the Czech Republic did not. We have not addressed this.
So the thing is, the Czech Republic is also a pretty unique thing because they managed to attract investments right out of the fall of the Eastern Bloc. So they got all the auto industry, they got all the large industry that is allowing them still to have an industrial output that is much larger and stuff like that. So we see that there is other type of jobs there which are not connected to the moment when the euro was introduced or stuff like that, right? Which happened before that. Now, we also see that euro is an important thing for Europeans to be committed to the European project, to be committed to the political vision of the European project. Because they told us people do not identify with the euro, they still count things in their old money and stuff like that. I don't think the Germans are actually counting in Deutsche Marks, or in Spain people are still counting in, can everyone remember what was their currency before the euro? I'm not sure that most people can now. So that is completely false. And now I think that it's extremely important to us to support the European Union as a political project, and this is because of the values that they bring, because of the progressive values, because, for example, they do not trade weapons with countries who have problematic regimes and stuff like that. This is what we think is the set of values and the progressive values that needs to be supported, needs to be supported in this global world that more than anything, most countries are thinking just about the economical downscaling, about what is going to be profitable or not. And
actually an expansion of the crisis, right? We believe that, sure, we have a lot of reasons for which we have an international economic crisis. The problem that we find inside of the European Union is that this economic crisis is actually affecting more agents, because if one economy that is integrated in the Eurozone is falling, every single economy has to suffer one way or another. We consider this as highly relevant and problematic. No favors. Now, what our extension leads us to the bench. I'm going to tackle 3 points: economically, socially, and receiving. First, economically. We believe that, as the first bench managed to prove you, we have a lot of problems when it comes to the influence of the currency over the economies of the countries, right? We have 2 points here. First, they inhibit trade between countries, but countries outside the European Union. But even if this wasn't, what they do is that they prioritize the needs of some strong agents that are able to bring a lot of capital inside the European Union by letting aside a lot of countries, such as Bulgaria, such as Romania, that might need to trade more than the other countries, which are being prioritized when it comes to the policies that the EU, by default, we are promoting, right? And second point we believe that we're incubating potential, because we try to create a reform that might work just fine for everybody who consider this as being problematic. What is the impact of this specific argument that we have put on the table in our extension? Because of the common currency, and because if one economy falls, everybody has to suffer, we have to fight with a great economic disaster when it comes to the European Union in the last years. Why is this problematic? Because of the leverage of big countries on the small countries and the abuses that we have seen as taking place in the status quo. Why am I saying that? Because when Greece has fallen apart, Mr. Speaker, and a lot of economies from the European Union were affected, even if we're talking about big economies such as Germany, what we have created one second, sir, is leverage for big countries to impose austerity measures and have actually making the economy suffer even more. This was the reason why we had the possibility to do so, because of the spread of the economic crisis inside of the European Union, which was actually augmented by the presence of the common currency of the euro. Before moving on to my second point, sir.
When Greece failed, the GDP of other European countries just budged. When the US failed, the world felt it. It's not about currency, it's just about the size of the country that is failing. No way about whether we have a common currency or not.
Sure, but we believe that it is highly problematic that inside of the European Union that was created actually to help the countries rise their potential, that was created to help every single economy better itself. In the moment in which one economy falls because of a current currency, every single economy has to suffer one way or another, and this gives leverage to others. We still consider it problematic, even if the entire world has the problem. So, now, second point, socially. We believe that the European Union has a lot of social values, right? A lot of good principles such as multiculturalism, such as integration of minorities. Why am I talking about this on an economic measure, right? Because when you suffer of measures of austerity, when the Eurozone has created the leverage for austerity measures to pass, what happens is that you're becoming to be a little bit skeptical when it comes to the decisions that the European Union is taking. What this is making, Mr. Speaker, is the reticence of individuals, even if on the social policies, even on the political policies that the European Union is taking, because they lost trust in the institution itself, no matter if we're talking about economical policies or every single other type of policies. We believe that by this, we're actually taking away the most valuable pillars that we have regarding the European Union, such as social integration, political norms, and we don't believe people do not trust those policies just because a currency failed them. For all of those reasons, we've never been so proud of those.
Sadly, we're going to pass speech in this way, Sofia doesn't interrupt. Here, we from the opposition.
Okay. Before I dwell into my point of why I believe that is one display, and that is what are the exact benefits that we get from the euro which we lose and if we do not have the Solonian level of comparison we believe that is given to us today. I would tackle a couple of the misconceptions and illusions before accepting the euro, and it can't do so. It is not kicked out of the European Union. There are a lot of countries that have this, that there are other countries in Europe who have done this, and who did not accept the euro. So it's not mandatory to do so. And if you accept to do so, you have to accept a couple of these obligations. Furthermore, they state that the European Central Bank, because of their use of euro, has control over government. That is not completely true. That is because you are accepting money from them in that way. So that's the same way the IMF has control over forcing austerity on those countries. That's why IMF, and even that is still a democratic decision, because you chose to take money from that organization. Now they have the right to dictate how, if you want to further money, how you're going to get it. We believe that is, first starters, democratic. Secondly, we believe that it is not necessarily connected to the euro. But now, to continue on, how exactly is this beneficial for those countries? We believe this is beneficial for all countries. And as you can see in their speeches, they are contradictory in this, because primarily they say only Germany is winning from this, but then they say Germany is losing because it is having to help Greece and these countries. We believe that everybody is winning. We do not believe that Greece is in decline because it joined the euro. It is in decline because the fact that there was an economic crisis in the world, the fact that they don't have any form of actual earning money, they don't have a strong agricultural, they don't have a strong industry that will bring them earning. So they are losing money and they are asking for help from others. And furthermore, I'll talk about why it is because of the euro that they are gaining this help. No, thank you. Moreover, we do not believe that it is true that these countries do not want the euro. Most of these countries want to stay in the euro because it is beneficial for those small countries. For instance, Greece does not want to leave the euro, even if it was forced to have austerity for 5 years. So obviously, we do not believe that they are stupid to want something that is wrong for them, because it brings them benefits. Lithuania in 2011 chose to accept the euro when joining the European Union, even after they saw what was happening to these smaller countries in this situation, because it was beneficial for them to have that. It was beneficial for them to have some who want to help them in the situation that they decline. No, thank you. And now, how exactly it was beneficial for Germany, because it was estimated before Germany entered the euro that their increase in GDP would be 30% lower than it was when they joined the euro for the same amount of time and the same years. So it is beneficial. Germany has drastically increased in power, mainly because it has more leverage and it has bigger bargaining chip. For instance, because of the fact that euro is a huge currency, it is currently the second most dependent currency, and thus reserve. Most countries either hold reserve money in American dollars or euro, gives them more bargaining power, so it is beneficial for them. And we do not believe that Germany, as such a small country, would be able to compete on a global level with these things. Not now. Furthermore, why exactly is the euro one of the things that is keeping the European Union connected, and is the reason why Germany is so willing to help Greece? Because of the fact that you have a certain commitment to those countries. The fact, yes, there are certain benefits with the free trade agreement in America, but America would not want to help Mexico so much because it isn't so much dependent. But Germany is dependent on the state of Greece, so it is willing to help a lot more, invest a lot more money into that country, which is beneficial for the Greek people. And we do not believe that it is so harmful for the Germany, because they prospered a lot more before this by investing in the euro, that they will still accept having the euro as the main currency. I'll take those.
So, tell us why exactly is it okay to have the French government accountable for problems with the economy which happen because of bad policies which Greece and the European Central Bank?
Two reasons that are already stated in my speech. Primarily, one, they opted into this. They knew that this could happen if they joined the